Hello and welcome to Family Cruising Essentials. I'm Julie Peasgood, and in this programme we aim to show you how taking a cruise could really be the most exciting and thrilling family holiday you've ever taken. Nowadays cruise lines are pulling out all the stops to not only keep the kids happy and entertained, but also the adults too. And joining me now is a travel guru who knows only too well how a cruise can cater for the whole family. Simon, you've got two children, 13 and 15?
Correct, yes, okay. Both girls, both quite girls. Nice, surprisingly.
You've obviously taken them on cruises. To a lot of people, a cruise isn't the ideal family holiday, as it were, but you beg to differ.
I beg to differ. More to the point, they would most certainly beg to differ. It's we first took them maybe about 10 years ago, so the little one was very small, the elder one was only 5, and immediately they liked the idea. Now, partly that's because it's such a nightmare travelling with me and my wife normally if you're a child, because we just want to go off and explore everywhere. Right. And of course they don't particularly like that idea, being children and wanting to do the opposite of their parents, which is completely understandable.
Yeah, they're not so interested in the local church.
Yeah, exactly. Museum. So they discovered that this idea that you just need to unpack once and that you just stay in your cabin and that kind of life revolves around the ship. They love that idea. And I tell you what, as parents, particularly once you get into school dates and you've got to stick to school holidays, in terms of finance, I must say, of course, you get price increases outside school terms. As soon as the bell goes, the price goes up. But it doesn't tend to go up as much for cruises as for other holiday options. And certainly if you take let's say a very good provider of land-based holidays, Center Parcs. Our last trip I looked at the price for a week at Center Parcs and a week at sea, and it was significantly advantageous to go on a cruise, even when you had priced in things like tips and so on, which you of course got to do, than going there. And they're both extremely popular with our family, but cruising was definitely the cheaper option, and of course easier to budget when, if they're on deck 15 there's a constant supply of ice creams, you're not going to have to keep putting your hand in your pocket to get some ice creams.
Very true.
So that works well in terms of budget as well.
You're right. I did an MSC cruise, and although I didn't take my daughter on that, she's now much older, she's 35.
Impossible.
But the queue for the pizzas and the queue for the ice creams just never ceased.
Of course,
but of course, you can relax as a parent. So what kind of activities and things are there for the children?
Well, of course, it's a whole range, and the cruise companies know that if they're going to expand the market, they absolutely have to go for families, and very often multi-generational families, and that might be something we talk about later. But therefore, they also know that as a parent, while it's lovely to be with your children, it's also quite good to be able to have a bit of time to yourselves. And so pretty much from the age of 6 months, some cruise ships will say, okay, 6 months to 2, we'll give them a couple of hours of sort of nursery, and we'll just do nursery rhymes and maybe a bit of messy painting or something like that. Then after that, from about 3 or 4 onwards, it gets really quite kind of, you get proper, very professional childcare, which is going to be doing a range of anything from, well, I've seen them going around the ship collecting autographs from every member of the crew they can possibly find, which must be about bit wearying for the captain and so on, to things like circus skills, and of course, nothing better than an evening eating pizza and watching DVDs in the kind of the kids area, and it seems to be very well organised. They're very health and safety conscious, and that's great. And that they maybe up to about 12 or so, they'll have the kind of traditional kids club. After that, of course, and you will know that once you get into your teens, your demands are a bit different, and they're all trying to find their own way of being cool, and how are we going to do this? And lots of video games and so on. It is a bit trickier, but of course, as with any travel provider, it's difficult enough to to provide for normal people, let alone teenagers, and they do face this constant challenge. But you know, generally, my 15-year-old had just been on a cruise. She was very happy with what was on offer in terms of the organised entertainment.
That's fantastic. Is there an extra charge for all that, for all the clubs and entertainment, or is it built into your cruise price?
All the cruises I've been on, it has not been. Sometimes they will have activities which involve, you know, maybe going to a speciality restaurant or something for a, you know, nice night out, and you'll be paying a bit extra for that. But in general, no, it's all included. But of course, you know, if it's during the school holidays and they've recruited extra staff to work there, then that will be probably reflected in the price that you are paying overall.
Sure. What about babysitting services? If you want to go off in the evening and have a meal on your own or whatever, is there a charge for that? And how do they contact you if your baby's crying?
Well, it's quite tricky, and we're talking here very much about sort of the very, very young children, infants, and so on. What they will tend to do is they may well have a kind of creche in the evening, so they've got a couple of carers looking after a number of infants, and basically you will be given a pager, and if there's an issue with your child, then you will be paged. But generally you can expect to have one or two civilised meals.
Yes, and you can always go back and check.
Yeah.
What about if you wanted in the daytime, Simon, to get off the ship and do a short excursion where you're close by, and the children don't want to come with you? Is there a facility for them to be on, you know, on days in port, back on the ship?
There's a couple of variables at work there. The first one is the policy of the individual ship. Some of them will say, no, absolutely, if you've got kids in our care on board, at least one parent or guardian has to be on board at the same time. And by the way, they know, of course, because you scan your cruise card when you get off. So if both of you got off, they're going to say, hang on, something wrong here, and it will ring alarm bells. And it may also depend on the age of your children. So the last cruise, 13 and 15, absolutely no problem. They wanted to stay on board. That's great. We just wandered off. But of course, you need to check. And if it's important for you as a parent that you're going to be able to get off and enjoy shore, whereas you know full well they just want to be in kids club and eating ice cream and pizza, you need to check that that's going to be available. And certainly my wife and I have been on a couple of cruises where we love the ports of call. We want to get off, but we've had to kind of do a kind of shift system where one of us goes and explores in the morning, then gets back on board, and the other one goes off and explores in the afternoon. That works, but you do need to establish early on what the rules are going to be,
what the parameters are, and do your research. And of course, the whole cruising experience is so educational for children anyway.
It should be, and that's of course something to strive for. Actually, in more ways than just, here we are in Rome, isn't it wonderful? Look at the 3,000 years of history before your very eyes. It's also not bad for revision. If you look at the late May half term, for instance, if you get a cruise then before the exams all start for GCSEs or whatever, you've got quite a lot of time on board, and you've got a library and everything. And it might be quite a nice environment actually to do some revision. And that might particularly appeal to the parents who think, well, you sit here and revise, help get yourself an ice cream when you want one. We'll be exploring the town, so that can work too.
That's a great idea. Do you need to book an extra stateroom for your children, or are there staterooms, cabins that have the whole family or interconnecting? How does it work? It
all depends what size and shape your family is. But we have a rule, which is that we're going to spend as little time in the cabin or stateroom as necessary, because here you are, you've got this great ship, big or small. It will have lovely facilities, great places to sit, whether that's outdoors on the deck, you know, by the pool, or whether it's you know, in one of the nice public spaces inside. You don't want to spend any time in your cabin. Nope. So we will, and we're four of us, so very often there will be a way of conjuring up a couple of extra beds, a sofa bed. Maybe last time we had a bed which dropped down from the ceiling. You know, because I walked in and I thought,
that.
Well, you know,
I'd have loved that.
I walked in, I saw a sofa bed, I saw a double bed, and I thought, well, hang on, what message didn't get through? And then the cabin chap came in and revealed this bed which just sort of dropped down out of the ceiling. So that worked. And it depends what you want to do. If you have, 3 or more children, then you probably want to start looking at interconnecting staterooms. You might, depending on the age of your children and the depth of your wallet, you might want to look at completely separate cabins. There are rules that apply to ages and so on, and you'll need to check those in advance. But certainly, if you've got maybe an 18-year-old, they would quite possibly want their own space. So they can be accommodated. Again, this is one of these very good reasons for talking to a specialist cruise agent.
Yes. Rather
than just, as is tempting, just looking up everything online yourself.
Well, we're going to take a break now, but I want to come back to what you said about multi-generational cruising, because that's fascinating. Do stay with us. We'll be back chatting more with Simon in just a few minutes. Hello and welcome back to Family Cruising Essentials, and travel expert Simon Calder is still with me. Simon, if I could touch on 2 very quick safety issues. The first is tiny children. Ever worried about them going overboard?
I must say I haven't. That's partly because I'm not consciously, although I suppose every parent unconsciously is always surveying the kind of the potential risks on board, and certainly falling overboard has not been anything that has ever struck me. I mean, I think I would be more concerned about accidents on the stairs, for example,
right?
Particularly if things were a bit rough, and but I think it's just sort of natural parents' concern.
Sure.
I haven't ever encountered any particular risks that I thought, oh gosh, I don't like that.
Good.
I would, but of course, if you do, then you need to draw it to the attention of the crew straight away, and say there's a possible problem here.
Sure. And the clubs that the children go to, I know, are stringent.
Oh, very well.
Their measures
and
discipline.
Quite right too. They're very well run by professional childcare staff, and they have very stringent signing in and out procedures.
Very good.
So that they are very well run. I've not had any worries there.
Excellent. Now your girls are teenagers. What about the aspect of not wanting them to, say, have alcohol, or concerns about that?
I think the cruise lines, we've touched upon this before. Being American run, they are very conscious of the laws on alcohol. Now, if you're on a cruise, say in Alaska or New England or whatever, then you'll be subject to generally the prevailing US laws, which generally say no drink for over 21s. In other parts of the world, it tends to be plenty of drink for over 21s. Sorry, yes. In parts of Europe, Mediterranean, Caribbean, it tends to be maybe 18. But I don't think that any that you're not going to be served, and they're not going to be served on their own alcohol. It might be considered, if you've got a 16, 17-year-old, that they might want a glass of wine maybe with a meal, but it's not a problem I've ever come across. I will watch out for it as they get older.
Do you dine all together? Do you all eat together as a family?
Well, as with any family, it's great at the end of the day, particularly if you've been doing different things, to all sit down together and say, okay, so what happened today, and talk about that. And we tend to go into the kind of slightly more formal restaurant and get waiter service, although I absolutely agree, if you're a teenager or younger, that's not going to be the greatest thrill of your day, getting all this sort of slightly fancy food, but it tends to work. Once you get into the buffet, it's kind of, I tend to think of it a bit of a kid's zone anyway. Just lots of pasta, burgers, pizzas, all this stuff. So that's fine for lunch, but we do try to eat together. Yeah.
When I first took Kate on a cruise, she was 25, but she's bonkers about jelly, and the fact that she could get jelly every single day. She didn't actually want to come on a cruise. She was sort of like, Mum, I'm too young. I'm 25. I don't want to go on a cruise. And I never forget stepping onto the ship, and there were 3 Zimmer frames, and it was like, you told me there would be some younger people. Then she went to yoga, and she met Nora Doreen and Pat, who were all in their 70s, they were inseparable. Truly, and the fact that the yoga teacher looked like Brad Pitt helped a little, but they were inseparable the whole cruise. And she's still in touch with Pat. So I mean, she made. In fact, that brings me on to multi-generational. Just go into that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a trend generally in travel towards multi-generational trips. That's for a number of reasons. Largely, thank goodness, grandparents are tending to live longer, and so there's more opportunity to travel as a three-generational family. On top of that, family shapes are changing. There's more, single-parent families, and it's all getting slightly more complex. And so, therefore, that's another good reason why a single mum might want to travel with her mum or whatever. And it just seems to work really well, because if you have got grandparents in their 70s or even 80s, maybe not getting around as fast as they might, then a cruise is a really nice environment for them to be on. For the children, I think it is genuinely a great opportunity for them to bond, because most of the kind of grandparent encounters tend to be one home or the other, and not in a kind of lovely shared space where there's all sorts of exciting things going on. And we've just been away with my mother-in-law, who's in her late 80s, doing very well indeed, and it was really lovely the way to see the way that our children were very, very positive about looking after her and making sure that she was okay, and calling in and spending time with her. So really good kind of bonding experience, I would say, and one which hasn't quite been explored by enough families, or indeed I don't think one which is particularly well supported by the cruise lines. We had a couple of issues with wanting to be close, but because she was in a single cabin, she was on the other side of the ship, and it all got quite messy in a way that it would be nicer to be able to say, okay, we're all together in this same area. But it worked very well, and I'm sure we will do it again. I
think it's a great idea, because there are things that you can all do individually. I mean, obviously, adults can do their thing and the kids can do their thing, and then and the grandparents, and then come together at set times. It is actually the perfect holiday. I've just become a grandma.
Impossible.
And my daughter's talking about wanting all our birthdays, my birthday, her birthday, and her daughter's birthday, are on 3 consecutive days. So we're thinking of doing a trip together, and a cruise would be great. What about little babies? You mentioned you can go on from virtually 6 months.
Yeah, most I've not encountered any cruise line which will allow babies younger than 6 months. And you may also get another restriction coming into play, which is that from experience of health issues, some cruise lines say if there's more than 2 or 3 sea days in a row, then the minimum age is 1 year. That's simply because if you're in the Atlantic, if you're off the coast of South America or whatever, and there's a medical issue, then they clearly have experienced that's quite often going to happen between 6 months and a year. So it is actually very, very good for parents with preschool children, any age from 6 months or a year onwards, because frankly, if you're 6 months old, you don't care where you are, and yet for the parents, it does give them a chance to travel, and also you've got various facilities for looking after the youngster and giving you a bit of time on your own. And you feel very safe. I don't know about you, I always, when I'm on board a ship, there's just this pervading feeling of safety. You know where you are, you know where your cabin is, you know what the times of things are, and you're looked after, but not in a too closeted a way. I just always feel very, very safe. Well, of course, and so you should do. It's very important that everybody gets part of what you're paying for is a sense of being looked after, and that's all very good. It is. Unlike going off and exploring a wonderful Greek village, nobody can get lost. When you're all confined within a ship, it works very well indeed. And of course, if you've got preschool children, you can also take advantage of very, very good prices. The pricing policies for children vary, but very often it's a fairly nominal sum for babies. For 2 and up, then they will come up with all sorts of deals intended to fill their cabins, and if you can go out at school time, it's very, very good.
Fantastic. Final question: are there adult-only areas on board where if you don't want to see your offspring or anybody else's, you can disappear to?
There are. I mean, bluntly, because children aren't allowed in, the casino is child free,
and the spa probably.
The spa and often there's a fitness centre, and often under 16s, under 18s are banned from there. I must say, if you really don't want to see children, then probably go for one of the cruise lines which do not accept children. But it's not. It's not a huge problem. I think the sorts of places that children enjoy being, and the sorts of places that adults want to have some quality grown-up time, that there's enough space on a ship for people to find their own, where they feel most comfortable.
Exactly, find their
Good
own
question,
level.
though. Yeah.
No. Thank you, Simon. Thank you so much. Fantastic to talk to you. And thanks to you again for watching. I'll see you next time here on TV Cruise Channel.